Bitte schön.
Sehr geehrte Mitglieder des Europäischen Parlaments, meine Damen und Herren! Lassen Sie mich zunächst einmal der Berichterstatterin, Frau Kappel, sehr herzlich danken und ihren Mitstreiterinnen und Mitstreitern für diesen exzellenten Bericht. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you this evening. These debates play an important role in further reinforcing the working relationship between this House and the EU Bank. Many issues raised in the report are extremely relevant, and I very much appreciate the support you give to the EU Bank in its role as a catalyst for investments that support growth and jobs, both within and outside the European Union. As you rightly point out in your report, the EU Bank is a very good deal for the EU. We put money to work. By the way, not so much taxpayers' money, but money we raise from investors on the capital markets. The financing scheme of the EIB is unique. The member states own the EIB, but they are not the principal source of funding. Indeed, the member states, over now 60 years, only paid directly 14 billion euro in cash to secure their equity share of the bank, plus 3.4 billion into the reserves. And this has enabled us, over the past 60 years, to disburse more than 1.1 trillion, as the rapporteur just mentioned, mobilizing up to 3 trillion euros of overall investment. This is a very efficient use of EU resources, all in support of EU policies that you in this Parliament shape and that we follow. So it is also thanks to you that we operate in an increasingly sustainable and innovative way, from issuing sustainability awareness bonds and green bonds to ambitious climate action targets in our lending. By the way, on sustainability awareness bonds, our latest product, this is very interesting. And when we all praised the United Nations for defining the Sustainable Development Goals, we were all made aware of the fact that taxpayers' money will never suffice in order to enable us to reach these objectives. We need to crowd in the private sector. And this is exactly what we at EIB are doing, and for which we have first, 10 years ago, developed green bonds, and where we are now developing sustainability awareness bonds. And the first issuance on the market has been very successful and encouraging. Ladies and gentlemen, investment in the EU has recovered, but the recovery is still uneven across countries and sectors. We cannot afford to become complacent when it comes to closing the investment gap in Europe. Just think of the areas of infrastructure or innovation where the EU is lagging behind. One key instrument to tackle this challenge is the Juncker Plan and EFSI, the European Fund for Strategic Investments. And I thank you very much for your kind words also to the work of Mr. Molterer. Mr. Kappel, in your report you take stock of the success of EFSI. It is our joint success, and it was the right decision by this Parliament to extend the programme to the end of 2020 with an increased goal of mobilizing 500 billion euro. And it is a remarkable decision, it has been a remarkable decision of this Parliament and Council to, so to speak, sacrifice 16 billion of the EU budget in order to shift money from subsidies and grants to a guarantee scheme. And this exercise, which is of course not at first glance very popular for a parliamentarian, has been a success, and I thank you for that courageous decision. EFSI already had a concrete impact. As of December 2018, it has supported over 850,000 SMEs across the EU and is expected to trigger over 371.2 billion euros of additional investments. It's a great example of what EIB can do to help scarce public resources achieve more. It reflects a paradigm shift from grants and subsidies to loans and guarantees, and has become a very strong element of Europe's public policy toolkit. I fully share the view that we should retain the key success factors from EFSI and take the lessons when designing the future InvestEU programme, and we are in very good contacts and discussions with the European Commission on this in order to translate what has worked with EFSI into the new regulation on InvestEU, and EFSI has worked. In this regard, I welcome very much the Parliament's position on the InvestEU, just voted on earlier, that indeed reflects the successful EFSI model. We very much appreciate that the Parliament has called for the EIB Group to have a dedicated share of 75% of InvestEU in the legal text. We also welcome that the report proposes changes that will deliver higher impact, ensure efficient management and support national promotional banks to benefit from InvestEU. Let me briefly turn to our role as the EU's external financial arm. For over 55 years, the EIB has supported the EU's external and development policies in a very broad range of countries at minimal cost to the EU budget. The bank is a global leader in crowding in private sector finance and delivering innovative financing solutions for the public and private sector. Through our engagement in projects both inside and outside the EU, the EIB has sectorial expertise across all regions and project types that it can deploy globally. And as the external arm of the EU investment, we are very active across all parts of the globe. For instance, with the aim of improving livelihoods and creating local jobs, we finance SMEs and micro-enterprises with limited access to finance in Africa, with a particular focus on youth and African women. At the same time, we finance climate action projects in Asia and Latin America and support EU diplomacy. And we are supporting EU policy very closely in the neighbourhood, where we stand ready to respond to urgent EU priority needs, as was the case, for instance, with the Ukraine package. Moreover, through the Economic Resilience Initiative for Western Balkans and the Southern Neighbourhood, we have stepped up our support to countries affected by migration, whether host countries, countries of transit, or countries of origin. There are many inefficiencies within Europe's development finance architecture, and there is growing demand among European bilateral development agencies for greater coordination, new financial instruments, and innovative banking solutions. While grants will continue to play an important role, there is widespread recognition that financial instruments to mobilise investment must grow in importance. The EU Bank stands ready to facilitate and coordinate EU external investment for our policymakers. The challenges facing EU foreign and development policy are substantial, with uncertainties surrounding US global leadership, with China playing a bigger role internationally, and, that might be the most important fact, with threats to the very concept of multilateralism. Europe is called upon to show leadership and tackle global issues. For this, we need a strong financing arm, and for this, we need a strong EIB. I'm therefore very pleased to see the emphasis in your report on keeping the central role of the EIB firmly reflected in the post-2020 architecture for financing outside the Union. And I'm confident that we can translate what we have now learned from EFSI for InvestEU also in the new regulation about our activities outside the European Union. These negotiations are going on at this hour, exactly this hour. Thank you also, Ms. Kappel, for raising the issue of transparency, accountability and tax compliance. I fully agree with you that we cannot become complacent in that respect. On transparency, already now we are second to none compared to other international financial institutions, and we intend to keep it this way. I would also welcome if the European Union and its member states would use the same criteria and standards for the lending activities of other multilateral financial institutions which they use for EIB. We are publishing more and more information on our activities and the impact that we have on the daily lives of citizens. On curbing tax avoidance, let me assure you that we are putting a lot of effort and time into this and are fully behind the EU's push to mitigate these practices. And we, of course, apply the EU blacklist and remain extremely vigilant that our money is not misused. Let me finally update you on one issue that will unfortunately keep us all busy for some time to come, as yesterday's events have yet again illustrated the impact of the UK leaving the EU. When, in my view, very unfortunately, the UK leaves the EU, it consequently stops being a member of this bank, which has a number of implications both institutionally and financially. In this context, I would like to express my gratitude for the Parliament's swift adoption of its positive opinion on amending the EIB statute and governance due to the UK's withdrawal from the EU. The UK's departure has meant that the EIB's capital would be reduced by approximately 40 billion euros. Of course, most of it callable capital, because the member state paid in cash so little. This will translate into roughly a 100 billion euro reduction in our maximum lending space. I do not need to tell you that such a scenario is in nobody's interest. As a sign of trust in the EIB, the Board of Directors, representing all Member States, has agreed measures to sustain and strengthen the bank's capital base after Brexit. The EU 27 members have agreed to replace the UK share in paid-in capital using the bank's reserves and to increase their callable capital. Some Member States have even volunteered to contribute paid-in capital to increase their role in the bank. We are therefore confident that we will conclude an agreement on the capital replacement before the UK leaves the EU, and most importantly, preserve the EIB's ability to achieve EU policy objectives. We will all lose in the context of Brexit, but I think Parliament and Council and Commission are doing the necessary to reduce the damage to the minimum. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm very much looking forward to the debate.